Hi, good evening. Hello, hello. Can you hear me till the back? Yes. People in the back, if you can hear me, show me three fingers. That guy is showing four. It's okay. Optimistic increments. Anyway, Gemini with Firebase Vertex AI in React apps. Lots of keywords thrown in this. Gemini, how many of you have heard of? Gemini, okay, nice, nice. Firebase, very nice. Vertex AI, fair few. React, good, very nice. Uh, yeah, and I'll try to include some memes because someone told me people like memes, so we'll do that. And let me start with controversy. Uh, so I made a popularity graph and I put React on the second. Yeah. So Node.js isn't exactly a web rendering framework and all that, right? So let's consider React is the most popular web framework. And any Vue developers here by any chance? Yes, you like this graph? Yes, no. Next.js developers, by the way, Next.js. Yeah, you like the graph? Okay. No, Next.js is built on React, so yeah, you're like, it's okay. It's our grandfather. It's okay. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So yes, this data is true. There's the source, and yeah, I did start off with some controversy, but I am a React fanboy, so it works. And anyway, hi, I'm Anubhav, co-founder Callchim.ai, GD for ML and GCP, and that might give you a question: why is this guy talking about React? Makes sense, right? So I am a web developer since before Bootstrap, uh, before Bootstrap was launched. Yeah, and back when I was a very small kid, I made a website which was among the top 1,000 websites of India by traffic rankings. Right. So web development is basically where it started. Right. The ML and GCP came later, and yeah, web development is inside here. Yes. Anyway, let's get started. The agenda is like really small. Introduction to yours truly, already done. Happy. And then there's Gemini, Vertex AI. I'll introduce them kind of together. Firebase and React.js again introduced together. Then we will have a very small demo. I'll show you how to do it. And very honestly, this is a very easy talk. There's nothing difficult in it. Right? It's really simple. And then we'll talk about some of the considerations. And then finally, I'll share some resources. That's it. For those of you who have never heard about Gemini, by any chance, it's the ML model by Google, which is supposed to be the competitor for all the other LLM models you have heard about from OpenAI, Claude, and Llama, Phi, whatever, right? And it's currently the only LLM model out there which provides you with 2 million context. What does that mean? 2 million context. Yeah, we'll talk about that very soon. And then grounding. Anyone heard of grounding? Okay, how many of you have made LLM based apps? LLM, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some people in the back. Okay, Next.js people are always making next like LLM apps. Very nice. Okay, so here's the thing, right? If you have interacted with an LLM API at any point of time, you know that they are dumb, right? I mean, you ask them the time. How can someone not know the time? Turns out it's not in their training data. The training data is almost always 3 months, 6 months, 1 year old, right? And if you ask it, what is the current time? An LLM does not have a concept of time, right? It's just a very advanced and fast database which has access to everything about time, a lot of poetry and knowledge about time, but not the time itself, right? Now, this is a drawback of these LLMs. All of them suffer from this, right? Even the Chat GPT we use, even the Gemini AI Studio, whatever you name it, all of them have the same problem, right? And then, since we are engineers, we want a solution to this, and the solution to this is grounding, right? And what does grounding do? Grounding facilitates real-time world information to an LLM before it starts making a response, right? So based on your query, some information will be added to the LLM prompt, and then it will be able to come up with accurate answer. For example, every time you ask an LLM the time, if in the context you also pass the current time, saying this is the current time, it will always have the answer, right? Because you have already told it. So grounding is basically done not by you, but by the LLM provider itself. And Gemini was the first to come up with grounding, in which you had available Google search based grounding, in which you can pretty much use any of the LLM APIs provided by Google, and you will have real time, real world results. That said, 2 million contexts. There are models which have one, and there are models which have two. So let me try zooming it in. On the right side, this is the token count. This is 1 million. You're right. But then if I switch to 1.5 Pro, it's actually 2. Right? So, yes, that is correct. Yeah. So, anyway, 2 million context, what does that mean for us? Right? So, think about you could fit in uh, almost 50,000 uh, Wikipedia articles in that. 50,000. Right? Talk about any topic, and you can fit in the entire domain knowledge of that topic into Gemini to produce one small answer, right? If you wanted to, and then hours of videos. There's probably a bunch of demos out there on the internet about how they are using these long contexts. Anyway, just talk about Vertex AI as well while we are at it. So this Gemini thing, right? Initially, it was known as Lambda, and then it became Palm 2, and now it's Gemini. And this word Gemini is actually very loaded in the dictionary of Google, right? Because when I say Gemini, who can tell me what is the URL for this? Anyone? Gemini? Gemini.google.com, right? You might have tried the app, tried checking if it is smart or not, right? So Gemini.google.com, that is a product. At the same time, Gemini is a model, right? And then there's also something called Gemini Ultra, there's something called Gemini Nano, and probably some other variants which I'm not really aware of now, right? So there's a bunch of these models, all of them together are called Gemini. At the same time, they also call their product Gemini just to avoid the confusion, but it actually confuses people more. And then the other terminology which they have really confused people about is Vertex AI. Now, Vertex AI is something which was introduced almost 6-7 years back, right? It came as a feature or a service of GCP, Google Cloud Platform, and initially it was used to uh, at the very starting it was used to train models, fine tune models, right? That's how it started. You could uh, upload your data set and pick up some foundational models, fine tune them, and then deploy them within Vertex AI itself. So what would be the end product of you uploading your data set, choosing a model, and then doing everything on Vertex AI? You would get an endpoint, which used to be uh, it's a ready endpoint, load balanced, everything auto scalable, and you could hit that endpoint and get back the output from whatever model you have trained on the data that you did, right? So that is how Vertex AI started, but then eventually it evolved, and as of today, uh, the most important things which Vertex AI offers is Vertex AI Studio, Agent Builder, and then some bunch of foundational models, right? So when I say Vertex AI, I do not mean you are limited to using Gemini, right? Just because it's a Google product does not mean they're forcing you to use Gemini. Rather, you could choose to deploy, let's say, Claude Opus on Vertex AI and start using it immediately. One click deploy, start using it. Mistral, Llama, you name it, all the open source models. So if there is any open source LLM model which you want to deploy and use at a production scale, Vertex AI offers you that. Now, that is the good part, right? Vertex AI is a battle tested product ready for production, right? So when you're testing and stuff, you do not want to go here. But when you want to go to production, when you want to build like really, really solid apps with a lot of users, that is when you think about Vertex AI. That said, let's quickly talk about Firebase and React as well. And this is how I look at it. Every time I do a React.js project, right? I do the normal React installation, and then my next step is install Firebase, because I don't want to care about the hosting, I don't want to care about the authentication and the real-time database and all the goodness, right? So, yeah, what is Firebase? I think everyone in this room already knows, and these are some of the actually very limited view of what is there on Firebase, uh, and who is using it. Very interesting, right? See, the reason why I'm talking about Firebase is not because it's by Google, but because I really, really love that project. Turns out last year, I actually exhausted the number of projects you can create on Firebase as a free user. So I had to plead the gods that please give me more quota for projects. And they did eventually. Uh, yeah, but then, there's a very interesting name in here. Who can point it out? There's one name which is like very interesting. Uh-huh. Twitch. Why? Why is Twitch interesting? What's the problem with Twitch using Firebase? I mean, Twitch has a lot of real time stuff. Why won't they use something like Firebase? Mhm. It's not the odd thing, right? It's a very natural thing to do, right? So Twitch isn't actually the answer to this. Not really. Okay, I did not notice that, but that's a good observation. Yes. Any other? Sorry. Wattpad. Why? What's wrong with Wattpad using it? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Something else. Alibaba. Why? Who said that? Chinese company is fine. The problem is they they themselves are a cloud provider. You understand that Firebase is a GCP product. Yeah, I mean Google has some restrictions in China, right? But then yeah, Alibaba is using it, and that's not the concern. My concern is that Alibaba itself is a cloud provider, right? They can actually, if they want to, create a parallel service to Firebase, but they choose to not to do so. Right? The reason being, Firebase is actually a very unique product. Right? If you think about this, there's been a bunch of people who have tried to create alternatives, right? And I say tried to because none of them are as well integrated and as well supported by I guess the open source community as Firebase has been, right? There's like tons of projects out there which use Firebase, and the number of integrations you have is like almost endless. I probably do not use more than 10% of what Firebase offers. And yeah, being a cloud provider themselves, they choose to subscribe to another cloud provider, right? So that is the most interesting thing here to me. But then, yes, as pointed out, the only Indian company. But yes, a lot of companies in India, I believe, use Firebase. Anyway, um, right? So this is also a very good thing, right? How many of you use Firebase here? How many of you use? How many of you do not use? You're like strictly no Firebase. Yes, two of you. Why? Not required as such. Very nice. Not required for you. Okay, maybe your use case isn't like that, right? So you do not really need Firebase in your projects. And very honestly, there's probably Firebase is something which I myself use in like say half of the projects I do, right? And half of them don't really require it. I don't need real time. I'm okay with like slow things happening because it's okay, right? You don't always need to have instant things happening on the website. But anyway, yeah, I think the next question is more like more agreeable, right? How many of you are using React? Yes. How many of you are not using React? Why? Not a web developer. React Native? No. This meetup? To learn about it? Very nice. Maybe you will like React. I'll share a sample code. Maybe you can just download and run it and see. Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. So anyway, let's do a quick demo. I have been given some amount of time. I want to use it judiciously. Right. Let's go with the demo of mixing all of these things together. Right. And what we are going to do, we are going to build this. And for those of you who are not scanning, if you want to answer to this question, you will have to scan. It will open a GitHub repo, and you will be able to see the code. I'll actually talk about the code itself. At the same time, there's also a demo link on the repo itself. And if you want to click and play with it, feel free. I will delete the keys, if any, exposed in the repo later on. But there might be some keys lying around. Actually, Google sent me a warning email. Okay, good. Yeah. So the code base looks something like this. Okay. How do I? If is it okay if I keep it on the dark theme? So pretty simple structure, and I'll tell you how many steps I did to do this, right? And let me actually bring it here. So the first step was obviously create a project with white. I used white. I think that's the current standard, right? Thank you for the validation. Uh, no, it feels good when such good people do that. Yeah, I created a white app with like React and TypeScript, and I'm using PNPM as my alternative to NPM. That said, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And then I just jumped directly into adding Firebase. And you might have done this, a million times before. So PNPM add Firebase and Firebase tools. Then obviously the Firebase login and all that, selecting the project, and then the Firebase in it, right? So once all of this was done, that is when I could do the next part, which was setting up the things. And I'll actually show you the code directly. There's nothing much in this repo. The most important thing probably is this src folder and this config folder, right? So if you look at the main.tsx, nothing, just importing app. This is the template. And inside the template, I did a bunch of things that will give you a very pink UI. Uh, but then before I show you that, I'll show you what I did in the config. And the config till here is probably the most standard thing you have seen in invoking Firebase or loading it into your project. So imported the keys from env, and this line is interesting, right? Get Vertex AI and get generative model, right? So this is something which was launched very recently, and now you can do Firebase/Vertex AI to load Vertex AI directly into your Firebase project. This was not there before, and if you want to integrate AI into your application, you don't really have to go to Gemini AI Studio, don't have to download a key, nothing at all. Your Firebase configuration itself is enough for you to start using Vertex AI, except one small catch. You have to enable the paid version of Firebase, which is the Blaze plan, because the reason Vertex AI is actually a paid product, right? So you will have to turn that on, and after that you will be able to use this configuration. No change. The way you have your existing configuration in your Firebase projects, just go ahead with that. Initialize Firebase, and then the next step is interesting, where we initialize first Vertex AI. And trust me, I have used Vertex AI with Python, with Golang, and even with Next.js. And this is the easiest way for me to initialize Vertex AI, right? I have other repos which I'll share, in which I have had a very long fight with Google SDKs to authenticate properly with Google APIs. Anyone face that? Their authentications are like messed up, right? You have to do a bunch of things before you can actually call a API or a service. And this is the easiest way I could find of initializing it. And then just load the generative AI model from Vertex AI. What is the model? We are using 1.5 Flash, and it has a 1 million context. And after that, I just created a function, very standard, very easy for people who have been into the JavaScript world, that it's an async function, Gemini API, pass the prompt, get the result, await, and then send back the text. Uh, and then I have simply exported just the Gemini API because I don't really need to import anything else from here. In app.tsx, let's ignore the other things, because being React developers, you will see the UI, you will understand what's going on. But this is the main part, right? All I do is const result await Gemini API and the prompt. That is all. And then I'm able to use that result. Right. So this is basically the easiest way I've seen of using any of the LLM APIs. Right. If you look at my env, I don't really have to even load this. It's like on a hashtag. I can remove it. No worries. Right. I don't have to include any extra keys. Whatever I have set up in Firebase, that is enough. Right. And then we can probably think about, yeah, let me go to that later. Let me try running it. There's a URL on the GitHub repo. Otherwise, you can also check this out. And the idea is very simple. You enter your name, that is me. You enter your zodiac sign. How many of you believe in horoscope? Horoscope believers? No? Yes? Some people are like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Let's not. Anyway, my favorite Harry Potter character is Dobby. That's new, right? And it gives me a very simple. It works. Basically, it works, right? So yeah, as simple as that, right? So let me come back to the slideshow. And what are the considerations I have to keep in mind? First of all, it's not a free offering, right? That is probably the first consideration everyone wants to have. Is it free? Is it paid? What is the rates like? And yeah, while you are in free mode, do not use Vertex AI. See, and I'm not really sure if Google really wants me to say this, but yes, this is a fair warning that while you are in development mode, go ahead and use Google AI Studio, get an API key. It has a generous free limit, and only after you are done developing with the free API, that is when you switch to Firebase Vertex AI. Or if you want, you can directly go to Vertex AI, but trust me, that's very, very complicated. Uh, and yes, don't fit a square peg in a round hole. If you don't really need to have an LLM or an AI in your application, please do not. I have kind of become tired by saying every company is an AI company these days, right? Let's not do that. If you really need it, only then you can use it. Just because I showed you can use Vertex AI does not mean you will go ahead and do it, right? When you need it, use it. And then yes, the good and the bad of React, right? A lot of people have a lot of complaints with React. A lot of people love it, right? So whatever is there with React, you will still carry it. And yeah, that is pretty much it. Here are some resources which you can explore. These are all links, by the way. You will be able to click on them. And just to make the Next.js people happy, I have also shared a repository where I have used Firebase, Jenkit, and Next.js to connect with the Gemini API. And Jenkit was the easiest thing I knew of before they launched Firebase Vertex AI. And that said, so that is all. Thank you. First of all, if you want to connect with me, I have the same handle everywhere, right?
Sure.
All over the internet. Even the website is the same. And you can give us feedback by scanning this QR code. How did you like the session? Do right, very awesome, very good, right? Things like those. And finally, the photo that you should be taking is this. You'll get the entire slide deck. You will get all the links clickable. Thank you.